In Quest of Truth, bottom of page 177. With Meher Baba, one is aware all the time that he is immersed in what might be described as thousands of chambers of thought. Those who are the master's intimates cannot but feel that strange remoteness that separates us all from him, though he will be, by his manner, just as human as are we all. That it is possible for God to periodically take on human form and manifest on earth is widely believed in the East, nurtured in the mystery of man's divinity and godhood. But such an idea is generally difficult to accept in Christian countries, since Orthodox Christians believe Jesus to have been the only Son of God, therefore, a unique divine manifestation that has never happened before. This belief is continuously emphasized in the churches, which would and could never accept the Eastern concept of man's innate divinity and ultimate godhood as a master on earth. As for people's opinion, Baba says, he who knows everything displaces nothing. To each one, I appear to be what he thinks I am. Only those who have been in contact with a perfect master and are aware that such men have all knowledge, all wisdom, and all power can have a glimpse of the tremendous disparity between a self realized man and one who is not. It is tragic in the West that while thinking men and scientists can appreciate the fact that all human knowledge is inexact, partial, transitory, and illusory, yet they do not know that, nevertheless, there always exist men who have transcended all the limitations of the human mind. If this outstanding and most important of all facts relating to human destiny were widely and generally known and accepted, what a tremendous change would take place in human values. Hero worship is instinctive in man. He knows, though hardly consciously, that he is immortal and divine. And for this reason, he is ready to worship himself in some apparently infallible personality. Lately, I've been worshiping um, uh, that singer, the Queen of Me. Who's that singer, Gloria? Um, Shania Twain. Yeah, she's my hero.
Recording. You are
But in avataric cycles, man is more uncertain, more ignorant of his own true nature and of spiritual realities in general than he is at other periods. Also, the stress and strain of modern life as it is today, with all its frustrations and complexities, entices him more easily to pin his hopes on some limited human being who promises to right his wrongs and lead him into an earthly paradise the short way. The pure simpleton is soon disillusioned, for had he any real understanding at all, he would know that utopias on earth are not possible. Life is but a school and a preparation for his journey through creation to the ultimate goal, which is the recognition of his own divinity and godhood. Therefore, a man serves his best interests if he worships a perfect man who can help him in his spiritual pilgrimage instead of running after false gods in the form of demagogues and dictators. How can we describe the personality of Meher Baba? It is impossible to describe the personality of the man god or sadhu, for he is one who has finished the round of births and deaths, transcended Maya, and attained to union with the Oversoul or God, and who, when he drops his body, remains God forevermore. Then, how to describe the personality of a God man? God descended in human form, who returns again and again at each avataric manifestation in a new body and a new personality in order to redeem mankind. It must be remembered that the master discarded his letterboard in 1954, so that his mandali had to interpret the master's commands, messages, and discourses through the medium of his signs and gestures. To watch the fleeting impressions registered on his sensitive countenance is to marvel that one face can express so much and so many things. It is truly an unforgettable experience. Painters in the past who have hoped to obtain portraits of the master have given up in despair, for they could never retain the impression long enough to register it on the canvas. And in photographs, it is sometimes difficult to know that the two likenesses are of the same man. So different may they be. God as man takes on the limitations of the flesh and lives much as a normal human being would. But those who are near can perceive divine authority in all he does, though they do not understand him. Yet at the same time, they acknowledge the fact that he is divinity in essence. To walk with a God man, to eat with a God man, to be with a God man are experiences that rarely come within the compass of an individual. Such intimacy can only be won through past contacts in former lives. They do not occur in haphazard fashion. There is a deep significance and meaning behind all such personal associations. Yet, in some life or other, every one of us has had to come in contact with a man god, and sometimes the avatar or God man, before attaining to the goal of life and ending our everlasting round of earth experience. Whoops. Miguel, could you unmute and continue, please?
I may have given the misleading impression that those in daily attendance on Meher Baba are nearer to him than those who are perhaps thousands of miles away and may have only seen him once or not at all. So I must explain that Baba has made it quite clear that distance being no barrier to him, those nearest to him are not necessarily his closest associates. Like all avatars, he has an inner circle of 12, but nobody knows who participates in the circle, for Baba has never specified them. We do not even know who will be his successor, for every avatar leaves a charged man to carry on his spiritual duties after he drops the body.
Let's look at that asterisk, Miguel.
And it says, this statement has been deemed inaccurate. However, let me give a few accounts of contacts with the master from certain people in America, quoting from their letters, for they give an idea of the tremendous impact that he can have on the consciousness of those who are physically a long way off. One of Baba's American devotees, when she was a little girl of about 6 years of age, will try in her childish way to visualize God and his appearance. One night, she went to sleep thinking intensely of him, and in her dream, she saw a face with long, curly hair. She knew intuitively that the face was that of God. For some years, the same face reappeared to her off and on, mostly in dreams and often during the day. Whenever she thought of God strongly, it came back to her.
Oops.
It was not till many years later, in 1932, that she read a news account of Meher Baba and found he was staying at the Knickerbocker Hotel in New York. She called and missed him. He had already left. But from that time on, she tried to get in touch with some of his disciples, though she failed to make any direct contact. One day, when walking past a book stall, she saw a book about Baba, and on its cover was the face of her dreams. It was not, however, till the summer of 1956 when Baba made a round the world tour, lasting 1 month only, that she saw him and recognized that her connection with him was a karmic tie due to past lives. Another of Meher Baba's devotees in the States, before she had even heard of Meher Baba, was attending a lecture given by a student of theosophy. She told him afterwards that she had a feeling some master was trying to reach her. He named several, but she said no to them all. Then the next morning she awoke with Baba, Baba on her lips. Sometime after that, she saw advertised the talk that one of the master's disciples was to give at the Steinway Hall, New York. This was after the disciples returned from India, when he had attended the 1954 meeting at Ahmednagar, to which Baba had invited some of his Western followers. She was able to attend this talk and through the lecturer made her contact with her master. Another devotee of Meher Baba says that the very first time she looked at a photo of the master, she saw the following words writing in while light over Baba's head. I am he who always was and always will be, in quotes. The following night, she dreamed that Baba came to her home and sat in a chair in her living room, listening while she played the piano for him. In the dream, he was barefooted and there was dust on the floor, and she noticed that his feet made imprints in the dust. The next morning, on awakening, she went into the living room, and behold, there was an actual pattern of footprints in front of her, of the chair in which she saw the master sitting as described in her dream. That the master makes a tremendous impact on some people goes without saying. But the effect differs according to the disposition of the devotee. An American I met in America in 1947, after I had told her about Baba, had an experience almost impossible to describe. She writes, quotes, I saw him everywhere for a few days. Everyone had his face, and it seemed to be imprinted on the ground, on bushes, on doors, on walls. It was everywhere. When I was meditating on the heart center, it was he that I saw, and the universe was full of nothing but Baba. I was very blissful in those days, but I made the common mistake of telling people, and they talked me out of it by saying it was an imagination, etc. I guess it is hard for anyone to understand that there can be a bond that is not a physical one and that can be reached through consciousness alone and not through the usual physical senses of hearing, speaking, etc. It seemed quite reasonable and logical to me that anyone who could function in a universal consciousness could contact mentally anyone he chose, anywhere. For where do time and space enter into consciousness? Every time I have had a real broadening and lifting of consciousness, there has not been any world of form there at all. The universe into pure being. You cannot tell me that God has to be something. I cannot even call pure consciousness by name. It is nothing. But for some reason with me, it is always formless bliss, an ocean of bliss and love that simply fills all so-called space and permeates everything like water permeates a sponge. That is the closest I can describe the wonderful experience I had in 1947. But the universe was not there. I was only aware of this tremendous blissful being that was a real consciousness. I suppose the Krishna self. I do not mean that it was me. It was all consciousness. And I individually was lost in it, as was any other form. Only the tremendous bliss and love remained. I have had that wonderful state 4 times since then. Once it lasted all night. And although, of course, I did not sleep physically, there was no fatigue. And when I got up to physical consciousness again, I could go right ahead with my work without feeling the least bit tired. That is the consciousness that the Western schools and churches do not seem to know to exist. That wonderful bliss that had everything included in it. But how can you call it God? For we are it, and it is us. I think the most perfect description of it is in the Gita, quote, I pervade all space with a fragment of myself, and I remain. It is extraordinary that a Westerner who had not even met Baba and who had so little knowledge of him should have had such an illuminating experience. But if we read the lives of the masters and the saints, we will find remarkable accounts of a similar nature. For that matter, a new acquaintance here tells me that once in the evening, when looking at the stars, she was filled with the most ineffable bliss, similar, she says, to what I have just described. Yet she knew nothing whatever about esoteric matters. In reading stories of the saints and masters of India, we are always struck by the remarkable acts of devotion performed by Eastern devotees. In fact, Such stories could hardly obtain credence in the West. I heard one concerning a young boy of 14 who comes from the village of Arangaon, near Meher Baba's headquarters at Meherabad. He performed puja at the time of the master's big meeting in 1954. The boy was so exalted at being in Baba's presence that he held the burning camphor in his naked hand till it had burned itself out. Some days later, Meher Baba, by chance, happened to see him and asked him what was the matter with his hand. Then the boy explained, and Meher Baba smiled and embraced him. Recently, at the age of 17, this same boy, because of his devotion, underwent a fast lasting 1 month, in which he took no solid or liquid food, nothing except water twice a day. He lately visited one of the Mandali in Ahmednagar and explained that he was looking for employment but did not wish to take a job till he could see Baba. So one of Baba's men brought him to the master, who was very happy to learn of the fast. He gave the boy 2 alternatives, one being to seek employment with a devotee in Bombay, the other to renounce the world and travel all over India for 12 years. He was never to touch money, never to beg for anything but food, and that just enough to keep himself alive. If he should choose this spiritual vocation, then he was to come back to Meher Baba after 12 years. The master explained at the time that whatever choice he made, it was the same to him, and the boy could do as he liked. As I write, I learned that he has decided to work for the devotee in Bombay. I saw him and was struck by his unusual face. I imagine that he has some karmic connection with Baba. One of the most extraordinary stories that I have heard is the one published in Meher Pukar, a monthly Hindu journal devoted to Baba. I have the translation in English. It is as follows, quote, Babaran Vyas, a schoolmaster and resident of the small village of Muskara in North India, is a Baba lover and worker. His 55-year-old mother, Jagrani Devi, also loves Baba devotedly. Early one morning, the 4th of May, 1960, Jagrani Devi went out to cut and fetch grass for her goat and cattle, for her goats and cattle. While returning with a large bundle of it on her head, she encountered a man of about 30 with a stout stick in his hand, who approached her and asked her if she knew him. She replied, "No, son, I don't know you." Whereupon he bent down, catching hold of her ankles and yanked her off her feet. The woman fell on her face and broke 2 of her teeth, but she sat up and berated him for his cowardly attack. He ordered her to remove and give him the gold and silver ornaments on her person. She replied boldly that she will not give him 1 bit of her gold and silver. He then caught her by the legs and dragged her towards a nullah, dry river bed. a short distance away. Realizing her life was in danger, she cried out, Baba, beloved Baba, Meher Baba, save me. If my love is sincere and you are verily God incarnate, save me. The man laughed, retorting, you cry in vain. There is not any Baba here or anyone else to help you. I should kill you and remove your ornaments and leave you in the nullah, and no one will know. When they reached the nullah, she was still screaming Baba at the top of her voice and from the bottom of her heart. He raised his stick to beat her to death, when at the exact moment, 3 cows seemingly from nowhere appeared at the scene at a quick trot, and the rosette-colored one, mooing fiercely, rushed at the man and attacked him with her horns, throwing him to the ground. He got up and defended himself with his stick. Jagranidevi took the opportunity to get up and run, but her assailant caught up with her and drove her back towards the nullah. But again the cow charged the man, and however much he defended himself with the stick, she kept dogging him and continued to attack, mooing loudly all the time. In the meantime, the 2 white cows stood beside the nullah, guarding it, as if to protect the woman, and at the same time helping the other cow by butting in at the right moment. Jagranidevi was by this time so exhausted and frightened that she could do nothing but keep on repeating Baba's name. The fight was at its height when a bullock cart was heard rumbling towards them on the paths towards the village. At this, the thug gave up the fight and fled. Hell was promptly given, and the people on the village took Jagranidevi home, the 3 cows accompanying the group for about 2 furlongs. Next day, the villagers went in search of the scoundrel, following his tracks, and he was finally caught and given into custody.
Thank you, Miguel. Marian, could you unmute and continue, please?
Baba, on hearing about the above incident, remarked, God is omnipresent, and the one who calls out sincerely to him never fails to be heard and to receive his help. That's a quote. There are naturally many stories told by devotees of miraculous interventions in which they have been saved, some even from death, while either Baba has been seen at the time, although physically nowhere near, or else an agent. It is said that there are innumerable agents in different parts of the world who carry out Baba's orders in the twinkling of an eye. One of the most interesting of such incidents was narrated to me by the persons concerned. I will borrow this story from my book, Civilization or Chaos. It happened in California. The initials N period and E period. Devotees of the Master were motoring in the USA and had gone for a long drive in an Indian reserve. They were climbing a lonely mountainside, and the car was unable to progress further, being stopped by a row of large stones drawn across the road. Obviously, it was dangerous to proceed. A landslide, perhaps? E, the driver, looked around and noticed that there was a detour up to the bridge above, the track going across the dried riverbed at their left. As she drove the car across, a voice suddenly called out, "Halt!" Startled, she looked round to see an old Ford car standing at the very place they had just left. E, feeling compelled to do so, reversed the car and went back. There was a man sitting in the Ford. Without waiting for them, he called out, "Follow me," and proceeded down the mountainside, with E meekly following. As the car wound away in front of them, N turned round to have a last look at the bridge they had hoped to reach, and noticed, looking at it from a different angle, that there was a large gaping hole in the middle. So if they had not been intercepted, they would have fallen through to their death. Suddenly, without a word of warning, the car in front, quote, went up in smoke, disappearing before their eyes. It simply vanished. Disconcerted and terrified, they now knew that something of a supernatural order had occurred. On arrival home, they immediately went to Baba, who was staying in the vicinity, and related their adventure. He replied on the letterboard with these words, quote, "You were just about to be killed. One of the agents came to the rescue." Close quote. Those who expect something for nothing will be disappointed, and this is illustrated by the wonderful story of Pleader, one of Meher Baba's Parsi disciples. Pleader met the master in the early days of his mission, and on hearing a discourse one day on the subject of spiritual liberation, he asked Baba if he could give him liberation. Baba replied that he would, provided Pleader was willing to carry out his orders and directions. After a short stay at the ashram, then at Meherabad, he was instructed to eat nothing, only to drink milk. He was also to observe complete silence and to see no one except the man who attended to his daily requirements. He was to read nothing, neither was he allowed to write. His lodging was changed once a year, but he continued to see no one save the Mandali, who had to attend to him, and Baba, who visited him once yearly. After 3 long years of this incredibly rigorous discipline, Baba had Pleader sent to Rishikesh to contact one of his agents, a 6th plain saint, well known in those parts. On finding the saint, Pleader showed him his master's picture by way of introduction, and was immediately taken into his cave, to the stupefaction of the holy man's devotees, who had never been permitted to set foot in the saint's abode. The saint then proceeded to ridicule Pleader's silence and his milk diet. Quote, "How do you expect to help humanity," he questioned, "if you do not speak? And just how do you expect to get milk in this rugged part of the world?" End quote. To this, Pleader replied with his letterboard that, in observing silence and partaking only of milk, he was obeying his master's orders. The saint asked if he had any great spiritual experiences at the hands of his master, to which he replied that he had not. Then the holy man's attitude warmed and changed. He smiled and declared, quote, "But your master has perfectly prepared the ground. At a touch from him, you will become perfect, even as he is. You will do well to serve such a master. You can have no idea of the infinite scope of his activities. Even I, with my spiritual knowledge, can fathom only a fraction of his depths, close quote. Meher Baba has explained that at the final stage, the gulf is so great between the sixth and the seventh planes that the difference in the states of consciousness may be likened to the difference between the consciousness of an ant and that of a human being. Many saints who have arrived at the sixth plane of consciousness may deceive themselves into believing that they have reached the ultimate reality, the final goal, whereas they still have an infinite abyss to cross. Also, it should be remembered that Meher Baba has explained that no sixth plane saint can attain to the seventh plane or union with God, that is the Oversoul, or universal consciousness, without the help of a perfect master. This fact is not generally known, but even to all the great saints who have reached the sixth plane. Not sure if I read that correct. I'm reading that again. This fact is not generally known, not even to all the great saints who have reached the sixth plane. But if we can appreciate what Meher Baba affirms about this tremendous distinction in the final stage of the path, it will be easier for us to understand why there are so many saints who believe, along with their followers, that they have already attained to liberation. Few there be, like this sixth plane saint, who explained to Pleader that he could fathom only a fraction of Meher Baba's depth. But that was because, as Meher Baba says, one who has reached the other shore of the vast ocean of imagination has realized that this last truth is the only truth, and that all other stages on the path were entirely illusory. For he has arrived at his final destination. But this is an intensely difficult and complicated subject, far beyond my power to explain, and I suggest that if the reader needs clarification on these points, he should read God Speaks. When scholars write about the historical personalities of great spiritual leaders of history, they are inclined to think that their followers had more blind devotion than discernment, not realizing that there may be much truth behind the marvels and miracles credited to such masters. Such narratives are not necessarily unhistorical. It is because scholars, with all their learning and all their wit, seldom have any knowledge of the fundamental laws that govern creation and, incidentally, man. That is why they are unable to appreciate how or why the avatars have sometimes sprung from a lowly heritage with no cultural background. Krishna was a prince who lived amongst the cowherds in concealment from his vengeful uncle Kansa. But later he sprang from such a position to one of the highest spiritual eminence, as proved in the Gita. Scholars think there were several Krishnas: the Krishna cowherd god, Mathura Bindravan, Krishna the tribal god of Ahiras, Gujars, and Jats, the Krishna Gopal of the early Tamil anthologies, the Krishna Devakiputra of the Chandogya Upanishad, the Kshatriya warrior of the Yadava clan, who played the leading role in the Mahabharata, and Krishna, the king of Dwarka. It is often asked, were they all one and the same character? But we know that erudite writers have gone even so far in their ingenious theories as to prove that the historic names of prophets and spiritual teachers of the distant past, including Jesus, may be merely variations of ancient cults and myths, the originators of which probably never existed at all, or have had their personalities merged with others. But scholars, as a rule, particularly of the West, know nothing of the powers and the hidden life of the saints and masters and their relation to the secret hierarchy behind the scenes. Hence, all the mystification when scholars seek to delve into the lives of such great beings of the past. It is naturally incredible to them that any one man can play so many different roles. Few scholars understand the nature of Jesus and his spiritual career and the reason for the tremendous influence he has exerted on future generations, though he was of humble origin and only the son of a carpenter. Undoubtedly, he must have been trained by John the Baptist, since it was John who made him perfect in the baptismal regeneration in the Jordan. We understand from the esoteric traditions in India that Jesus went there and that after the crucifixion, his body was taken to India and buried near Srinagar. We know nothing about Muhammad's inner development and spiritual training. It was kept a secret. It appears he had no unusual descent, for he was a desert businessman. But some of his relatives appear to have been notables of Mecca, and he himself belonged to the Quraishi clan. Meher Baba is an exception, and some of his spiritual training has been revealed, for having been born in this sophisticated age, it was appropriate that information regarding his spiritual life should be given. Also, he went to school and college, so was educated in a normal fashion. This was necessary, since he has a worldwide mission. We know that Buddha's teachings began only after he had attained to enlightenment. There is a story of the Buddha that when he came out from under the Bodhi tree, his 5 disciples had been waiting for him with the word, quote, brother. Call me not brother, exclaimed the Buddha, for his true spiritual status was now perfect master, so that they could no longer regard him as an equal. The past avatars did not have unquestionable authority till after they had attained to the same heights as the Buddha. It has been the same with Meher Baba. Baba has gone through various phases during his spiritual career, and, as so much has already been written on this subject, there is no need here to go over this ground again. From what we can glean from the world's sacred books, it appears that all avatars conducted their missions with unquestionable authority, with a dignity and certainty of their divine status that has always stamped its imprint on the religions that followed. As we know, from the beginning of historical time, religions and civilizations have been intertwined, and all civilizations have been influenced by the personality of the avatar of the age. So how could these be just ordinary men? It should be recognized that though religions are undoubtedly influenced by the great spiritual figures of their time, nevertheless, the avatars remain conspicuous exemplars of the impersonal stand. But unfortunately, as the ages roll by, the essence of the teachings is eventually lost. Also, a religion also loses its efficacy and influence when it becomes encumbered traditionally and officially, even though outward observances are always necessary for the uninitiated and for ordinary social life. But at the same time, the inner and essential truths should not be forgotten or suppressed, which is often the case. The professional philosopher who knows nothing but the theoretical aspects of the subject he studies can be likened, as by the Buddha, to a herdsman of other men's cows, or as by Muhammad to a donkey bearing a load of books. Even so great a thinker as Albert Schweitzer understands little of the esoteric constitution of man, since he believes that no mind exists or could exist that could comprehend the universe. He understands nothing of the role of Jesus as an avatar, who, unknown except to his chosen few, was directing the world affairs of his time. Men pay homage to Jesus as a divine being, while at the same time they understand nothing of what constitutes divinity. Schweitzer, like all critically minded thinkers, was also troubled by the conflicting accounts of Jesus given in the Gospels.
Thanks, Marianne. Gloria, could you unmute and continue?
Krishna declared that he was Lord of the universe. Jesus said he was the light and the way. Muhammad claimed to be the prophet of God and declared that he was the city of knowledge. In other words, that he had the universal consciousness, which all those who have realized God possess. Meher Baba states that he is master of the universe, and all the avatars have expressed the same truths differently, according to the times they live in. But in spite of contradictions, nevertheless, their teachings are intrinsically the same, for hidden knowledge cannot be imparted to the whole polwa, but only to initiates. Asterisks. The masses. Okay.
Apparently that's Greek, hoi polloi.
Okay. Buddha had trouble in his time with the Orthodox teachings. He probably was not opposed to Vedic orthodoxy, but would have regarded its preoccupation as worldly and therefore to be transcendent. His standpoint is well expressed in his own words as follows, quote, I, monks, do not dispute with this world, but the world disputes with me. No one who professes Dharma, monks, disputes with the world. Whatever the learned in the world agree upon as it is not, I too, monks, say of that, it is not. Whatever the learned in the world agree upon as it is, I too, monks, say of it is. Quote, might we not regard the learned as applying to real initiates, not to the pundits who only understand the letter and not the spirit? Jesus certainly had trouble with the Pharisees, and even some of the followers of John the Baptist appeared to have criticized him, though the perfect master who enabled Jesus to realize his avatarhood said of him, quote, but one mightier than I command, the latchet of whose shoes I am not worthy to unloose. Quote ends. For he knew Jesus to be the supreme master of Kutub of his age. Meher Baba today ignores all creeds, rituals, and ceremonies, but still says that he should not change our religion, but stay in it and revivify it. In these days of universal education and great advance of technology and science, Baba naturally adapts his philosophy of life to the trends of the times, so he can say frankly, between quotes, I am God. But he also says, quote, in quotes, you are God. The great difference is that Baba knows he has union with God, whereas we don't know what we are God. But in some life or other, we have to awaken to the reality of our own divinity. For that's our highest purpose, the aim, an object of our existence, even though we may not be aware of it. But should we come in contact with a perfect master, we instinctively arrive at a quickening of our spiritual consciousness, and no matter how slight may be our association with divinity in human form, our future lives will be minimized, and we will be further on the path to liberation. Here, I might mention one of Baba's close devotees, an elderly Parsi gentleman who belongs to the Zoroastrian priest class. As he had such outstanding experiences, I asked him one day if he could write some down for my book. He protested, quote, "But I have no mind," quote. For such illuminations are beyond the scope of the mind. He constantly repeats Baba's name and he has glimpses of Baba's divinity. He has said that at such moments, even a dark room can be full of light, incomparably brilliant, and in it he sees Baba. One point should be made quite clear. Baba does not ask those in search of God to give up the world and go into seclusion. On the contrary, he tells us to be in the world and not of it at the same time. That is to say, we must keep God first and foremost enthroned in our hearts. Another point of importance is that Baba does not encourage his devotees to practice any form of yoga or to go in for, quote, experiences, quote. Baba's yoga is love and service. Man's excessive concentration on his material affairs or his spiritual affairs matters not. What Baba seeks is the elimination of the ego of his devotees, and he may eliminate it the hard way and in a manner quite unexpected and even unacceptable to the devotee in question. For instance, when Baba says, quote, "I will help you," quote, this help may be something not appreciated by the recipient who knows not his past, present, and future in the sense that Baba does, nor know how best he can be a spiritual benefit. It is often asked if Meher Baba performs miracles. For the uninitiated, invariably connects miracles with a saint or master. We might here remember what the Buddha is said to have stated, quote, "I see danger in the practice of miracles and so-called supernormal wonders, and loathe and abhor them, and I am ashamed of them," quote ends. But this statement may be a little misleading as it does not fit into any such generalization or correspond at all with modern notions on the subject. The Buddha regarded the power to work miracles as a natural and excellent thing that invariably came to those on the path, but should not be exhibited for the curiosity or amusement of the vulgar. He himself on several occasions vanquished his adversaries by their own means, as did Moses, the magicians of Pharaoh. Meher Baba does not like miracles, and when he is told of one having taken place, he will always say that it has nothing to do with him, but is due to the love and faith of the beneficiary. Also, Baba does not like to have miracles attributed to him, for miracles have nothing to do with spirituality and are merely happenings that belong to the subtle spheres, and thus unimportant in the eyes of the masters. Jesus is chiefly remembered by his miracles, but we have to take into account the primitive times he lived in with no hospitals and modern means of alleviating human suffering. Then again, Jesus, for the sake of humanity, had to sacrifice himself, and the unorthodoxy of his healing served to arouse the ire of the Jews. Nevertheless, we have to remember that there are masters who have performed many miracles of healing during their lifetimes, as in the case of Meher Baba's two masters, Baba Jan and Sai Baba. In fact, Sai Baba used to say, according to the translation, quote, "I give people what they want in the hope that they will begin to want what I want to give them," end quote. I will here touch on some of the personal aspects of the great avatars. For example, when a master gives food and clothing to the needy, the result will be that the world will gain in economic and material welfare. When a master washes the untouchables, the insane and the lepers with his own hands, they will be spiritually and sometimes physically benefit in the future lives will be minimized. If a master fasts, the result of fasting is felt by the whole universe spiritually, for a master's work is always for a spiritual end. If he observes silence, the same result is brought about. For the universal mind has infinite ways in its universal work. Whatever work a master is doing reverberates throughout the universe and produces or reflects action. All the outward actions of a master are therefore inspired by some spiritual need in the universe. It is perhaps difficult to understand this, but a master's most important work is in the manipulation of Maya. For Maya is the dominating factor in our illusory world, and a master's peculiarities are intimately associated with his handling or tricking of Maya. The attitude that Meher Baba's followers have might be well expressed in the following French quotation. I am afraid I don't remember who wrote it. Maybe Marianne can read this French. Or you, I don't know French. Could you read it?
You ask Marion?
Yes.
Yep. Do you know Marion?
And mine's very rusty. I could give it a try. Shall I try it?
Sure.
Je ne sais lequel est le meilleur ou le pire en toutes choses, car ça dépasse la force des hommes et des anges et reste parmi les secrets de notre providence que j'adore et que je ne veux pas approfondir.
Got any idea what it means in English, Marion?
Je ne sais, I do not know. So I don't know what all I wouldn't be able to translate all of that.
I do not know what is the better or the worse in all things.
Man.
Dépasse la force des hommes. The force of men and of angels, and rest the secrets of our providence is God, right? Of God.
J'adore.
And I adore.
I love.
And which I do not want.
I don't know.
Approfondir. I have no idea what that word is.
I don't know.
Continue, please. Continue reading, please, Gloria, for a bit.
I am often moved by their wholehearted and unquestioning devotion, but was it not the same in the time of Jesus? Did he not say, quote, "He who loved wife or children or lands more than me is not worthy of me," quote ends. Baba always stresses to his followers that he is the one and the same avataric soul through the ages. He maintains that from the beginning of every cycle to the end of every cycle of time. The avataric scope of work gains relative force. He also affirms that the avatar, in the period ending a cycle, has in him all the accumulated strength of the previous avatars of the cycle, and is a balanced mixture of all their characteristics, and as well, he carries the increasing capacity of undergoing universal suffering with all its universal strength and weakness. One might say that Baba, like most of the great teachers, does not encourage intellectualism, as Ramana Maharishi opined. It is, quote, "It is the unlearned who are saved, rather than those whose ego has no suicide despite their learning. The unlearned are saved from the unrelenting grip of self-infatuation, from the malady of a myriad whirling thoughts, from the endless pursuit of mental wealth. It is not from one ill alone that they are saved." Quote, end. Parent 40 verses, parent. The flood of books on the market dealing with the spiritual philosophy becomes very confusing to those who read too much. One would do better to read less and to attach oneself, if circumstances permit, to some teacher in whom one finds an adequate guide for one's needs. For as we are within the grip of Maya, we will always remain confused. Some people complain of Meher Baba's uncertainty in his movements and of the fact that he is continually changing his mind. It is impossible to excuse or to explain the master's eccentricities any more than we can throw light on the peculiarities of other masters. I can only repeat that it should always be borne in mind that a Sadguru or an avatar is working for infinite ends, whereas ordinary persons work for finite ends. Therefore, the scope and manner of a master's working must necessarily be different. This is obvious if we compare Baba's postulings, actions, and the riddles of Jesus, Krishna, and other avatars. One of the oddest characteristics of the master is his habit of making dramatic pronouncements. For instance, that he's going to break his silence at such and such time, or that certain events will take place at a given date. Then nothing at all seems to happen, that is, so far as we know, from the viewpoint of external world happenings. We have noticed that when Baba does issue some momentous declaration, his immediate circle does not always appear to be particularly concerned, but to outsiders, it is always a problem to explain the master's contradictions. The master's technique of quote, quote, tricking Maya cannot be understood either by intimates or outsiders, but it does appear that he makes use of the energy engendered in the emotions of his followers for some purpose of his own, in connection with the inner spheres of consciousness. The most Baba has explained about himself is to say, quote, "The world is against spirituality and so against me. As I have often told you, do not be hasty in forming opinions regarding my words or deeds. My words will prove to be true, but I alone know how, when, and where. You will not understand them because to understand my mystical statements, supernatural intelligence is required." Quote end. As I have already said, in ordinary life, Baba is friendly, intimate, and easygoing. In fact, one of his characteristics is to show that all men are equal. In India, it is the custom to show great veneration to saints, such as prostrating oneself on the ground before them when first ushered into their presence. But Baba will have none of this. He greets visitors like any ordinary individual. In fact, when facing great crowds of people gathered to render homage, it is he who does the bowing. He who renders the homage, since he recognizes the divinity in every one of us, no matter how humble we may be. He teaches, in fact, that there is no difference between us and him. Only he knows he's a good man, whereas we don't know our own spiritual status, but we shall know sometime or other. The masters have all taught the value of silence. In non-Christian books from Muslim and Hindu sources, Jesus is reported to have stressed the value of silence. Even today, there are Eastern and Western orders that practice silence. Father Seraphin of the Russian Orthodox Church was silent for 35 years. He lived in a monastery several hundred miles from Moscow, and the faithful believed that he was instrumental through his powers in saving Russia when Napoleon marched on Moscow. Sai Baba was not for speaking rarely to visitors, and it is a characteristic of the saints to be very silent. Meher Baba has remarked when once asked why he does not speak, quote, "If you were to ask me why I do not speak, I will say I'm not silent and that I speak more eloquently through gestures and the alphabet board. If you were to ask me why I do not talk, I will say mostly for three reasons. Firstly, I feel that through you all, I am talking eternally through your forms. Secondly, to relieve the boredom of talking insensately through your forms. I keep silence in my personal physical form. And thirdly, because all talk in itself is idle talk, lectures, messages, statements, and discourses of any kind, spiritual or otherwise, imparted through utterance or writings, are just idle talk when not acted upon or lived up to. If you were to ask me when I will break my silence, I will say when I feel like uttering the only real word in capitals that was spoken in the beginningless beginning. So that word is alone worth uttering. The time for the breaking of my old word silence and not utter that word is getting near, close. End quote.
Beautiful, Gloria. Thank you. And we'll pick it up here at the top of page 206.